This was Jeff's class, but he requested me to step in for him. So let us pray. Let's have a silent prayer before we start. Amen. So, uh, the last time I had a class here, we were trying to understand some concepts. So I said that we stand here in history. So this is where we are in history. I was saying that we need to look back and try and understand the events connected to this waymark. So we need to have clarity. And I tried to explain some concepts. The first thing is the conflicting ideas that we have on what is the date for this waymark. So, and we were trying to understand some kind of shifts that we have made. So I think the first class, we tried to understand why we have made a shift. So when we look at the marker for this event, I think we tried to discuss how we made this shift from expecting it to be marked by a law to an event we call an election. So we were able to discuss all that, basically looking on this July 18, 2024. So, and I also highlighted some other subjects that we need to bring back to consideration. So I was able to list a lot of events that we expected or anticipated to have been fulfilled on this way back. And I think I can just refresh our mindset. Don't see those notes. No. But maybe I can touch on a few of them. So we spoke of this first event. We spoke of a law. So we had subjects or we had stories that had imparted into our mindset the idea of this being a law. So we went to stories like Esther, Haman's decree, Nebuchadnezzar's decree, Daniel's decree, and this is where those ideas came from. Ellen White, great controversy, when the law goes forth. That was the first thing we looked at. And then we spoke about persecution. And I said we also need to understand the persecution we spoke about in the Sunday law history, how it looks like. We spoke of the threefold union. We spoke of, people can remind me, those who remember, a lot of events. And I think we also spoke of the deadly wound. We spoke of public evangelism. And we also spoke about the history of the seventh kingdom. So, and what I was trying to bring into our attention is that some of these subjects and the manner in which we have been looking at them and expecting them to be fulfilled, and what we are actually seeing now seems not to be in harmony. So, and we were trying to ask ourselves, where might the problem be? So then, a few weeks ago, I also had a class, a Vespers class. It was on Friday, and I tried to continue the same thought. And we were trying to understand about the Laodicean mindset and how biases have affected us into understanding these subjects. And I think on that class, we tried to look of all these models that are here. We spoke a few, we tried to discuss a few of them, and where these ideas came from, where these concepts came from, and then we tried to see how we need to see it in a new perspective. And I also spoke about this date, July 18, 2024. So I'm just trying to review so that I may make my point today. So, and what we were able to see is that we have still some of us who are still struggling to see the validity of this WEMA, July 18, 2024. And maybe tried to ask ourselves where the problem might be. And we saw it's the issue that we have. It's how we are approaching the subjects that have been given that prove this date. So the first one that we looked at is QFMG. So this is the study that was first done to prove July 18 as 2024. And when you look at this subject, so Quintus, we say it gives us the concept of the fifth, seventh month. So this under the Roman nomenclature was first the fifth. Then after the change of calendation, it was made the seventh month. So it gives us July. Then this one gives us the aspect of voting, election. And this was seen to be a common one, maximum flood, which is a marker or a symbol for the Sunday law. So we are trying to understand some of the ideas that surround this subject here. And the first thing we saw is about the Roman nomenclature. It's all about calendation. And I think we tried to understand that the issue of calendations, coming to a symbol like this and trying to see under the aspect of the Roman nomenclature, how they overlay two calendars. One, it's the fifth month. The second one, it's the seventh month. And it took us back to the Millerite history. And we also saw they also had the aspects of calendation. So it was not a new concept to us to see someone take a calendar and overlay it on another calendar. We took steps ahead and also saw during the Midnight Crime message, what Elder Tess uses to establish November 9. It's all about calendation. Taking a calendar, a revolutionary calendar, overlaying it on a modern calendar, and a date on a revolutionary calendar manifests on our modern calendar as November 9. I hope people can remember all that. So we also spoke about the second concept. And this is looking at the history of Hitler. And we also addressed the same subject in a little bit of details. So we saw that the rise of Hitler Hitler has also been used as another testimony to justify July 18, 2024. And the third one that we looked at is the history of Rome. And also we focused on Julius Caesar. I want to touch a little bit on these three concepts. And also we spoke about other studies that have been given that also address and give more proof for this WEMA. We spoke of the 10-year history from 2014, which was a Sunday law, to 2024, a Sunday law. This 10-year history that shows the work of organization of the Republican Party. So we saw the purge begins here, and this is the end of what we done in 2014. And then the second concept we looked at is the threefold union. And the third one, we spoke of 1979. So the history of the king of the north and the south goes hand in hand. to 1989. So this is the 10 years period that marked the downfall of the King of the South. And so from 2014, when Putin rose to power, to 2024, we expected to see the downfall of the King of the South, a 10-year history. So, and I say we need to isolate every subject here and try to understand it in details, what contribution it gives to our understanding of this Wema. So, let me see whether I left a point. Yeah, this one. And we also spoke about the rise and fall of kingdoms. So all these subjects, they are helping us into the understanding of this Wema here. So it's prudent for us to go back, look at this, study in details, this one, all of them, to see why it makes more sense to have July 18, 2024 as the beginning of this Wema. And I think the point we say is that how we begin this dispensation. So this is a new dispensation that we are in. And on this new dispensation, this is where the dispensation begins. If we get this date right, if we begin it right, we end it well. So, and I think we tried to show that in this new dispensation, we are under a test, a new test. And this, for us to understand the test here, it's important first to understand the Wema that begins this test. Because on this Wema, a message arrives. This message is expected to increase in knowledge and test us. So when we get it right here, we will know what message is going to actually test us in this dispensation. So, and I think on the same class, on the same breath, we were trying to ask ourselves, why do we have different views and understanding on this Wema? And we were trying to say that the most important thing we need to understand is methodology. So I know that when you speak about methodology, most of us would believe that once you have a subject or you are trying to interpret something, people will try to apply methodology. But I think the most important thing is to know how to apply it correctly. And I think on the very first class, I tried to give an example of how we would come to difference of opinions, and yet all of us claim, I am using methodology, but this is my answer. Someone else claims to use methodology, but still appears to have arrived to also a different answer. And one thing that I gave a good example about the history of Hitler. So I'm going to be touching a little bit on this concept, the rise of Hitler. So as an example, so someone would have a difficulty in understanding how this subject would contribute to the understanding of that Wema. And what we did that is, we went to the history of Hitler and say, this is a study about Germany. And the history of Germany is being used to explain to us the history of USA. So during the Being a Crime message, this concept was first used. Number one, under the history of World War II, we were able to equate Germany to USA. Number two, we also used the history of revolutions, the German Revolution. And it was used also to equate Germany to USA. So it's not a new concept when I take these two things. And I remember refreshing the minds of the people around 2018. Was it December? A time like this. That's when Elder Tess came to Kenya and we had a camp meeting. And what is the subject that she more dwelt with? It's the study about the rise of what? The rise of a dictator. And what she was able to show us is that if a dictator has to rise to power, it's in a two-step. First, for the nation, then for the what? Then for the world. And we were able to see that when you rise for the nation, it's under two phases, 1 and 2. first, you need to have a strong party. You need to control, to win and purge out elements of opposition in your political party. And with a strong party, you can also purge out elements of opposition in the government. And once you have taken over the nation, you now go to conquer the world. So this is the study that she was able to demonstrate to us. So we were able to look at the history of Hitler, Night of Broken Glass, the Night of Knives, all those histories where we have dictators like Stalin, Hitler, who had to rise to power, how Hitler has to first deal with elements of opposition in the nation before they desire to go and conquer the world in the history of World War II. We also looked the same pattern appears for the counterfeit, the papacy. He asked first to organize the church before dealing with the affairs of the world. The same pattern God's kingdom follows. First, the gospel is given into the church, and then the what? The world. So this was a concept that was given to us to help us understand. And I think for me, when I review this concept, all I'm trying to see is that the rise of Hitler has the perspective that the teacher wanted us to see is how you rise as a dictator, and it's first through the party. And so what you were able to see here, 2014 to 2024, you need to be able to thread your storyline. We marked this takeover from 2014. And what you need to do is to thread your storyline progressively. When you come to 2014 and look at the three most important events that we marked, you come to the next mark, you say 2016, still dealing with the same story. You come to 2018, the same story. You come to 2019, we marked the rise of Trump as a dictator. And if you remember the studies here in 2018, the perspective you wanted to understand is how Trump rose as a dictator in 2019. And the perspective was all connected to the what? To the Republican Party. You come to 2021 and you can see January 6, it's all connected with the affairs of the party. So by the time you come to 24, you're completing your thread of story. So, and if we have the refreshment of all these thoughts, it becomes easier for us to see the connection that is being made when we speak about the rise of Hitler being used to demonstrate the rise of Donald Trump. So it's now going deeper and zooming in to realize that when Hitler was rising to power, a series of events unfolded. First thing is that for him to be able to become the Chancellor of Germany, he needs a vehicle to propel him to that position. And this is a political party. And the manner in which he takes over the Nazi party is the manner in which Trump takes over the Republican Party. So you are doing two parallels, one a natural story, trying to explain to us how this history of today looks like. So, and what we also tried to demonstrate was that when you come to the history of Hitler, so this is the history in 1933, which is trying to teach us about 2024. So what we saw is that when you look at how they take over, so I'm going to draw a structure here. So the upper line is about Hitler himself. The bottom one is about Trump. And what we were able to see is that when you look at the history of Hitler, so this is when he first takes over the party. So let me say win over the party. So this is 1933. And it looks so close that the moment he wins the party, it's so close to when he wins the nation. By winning the party, he wins the nation. But when you look for Donald Trump, it is different because Trump wins the party. This is July 18, 2024. But when does he take over the nation? Later, you say 2025. Is it January 21st? When he's inaugurated as the president. So the problem that we would have with such a storyline is that some of us are expecting And this is the mindset that we have had for so long, that when you look at the spirit given by Revelation 17, the rise of the seventh kingdom, what marks the rise of this kingdom is what? The taking over of what? The party or the nation? Yes? It's the taking over of the nation. But the perspective we are being shown right now is the taking over of what? Of a party. And that is where the conflicting ideas are coming from. Some of us want us to see, based on what Revelation 17 demonstrates, that this Wema is the takeover of a nation. That's the spirit that has for so long been into our mindset. But what we are being told is that before you go and see how a nation is taken, you need to realize that this is a process. The manner in which things look in the old times is different from the manner in which things look today. So it's through a strong political party that you can easily have the chance of taking over the nation. Actually, just to mention loosely, I'm not an expert in Kenyan politics, but even if you look at the political world today in Kenya, what is the point of contention? They believe whoever will have a strong political party by 2027 will end up forming the next government, right? So the ODM party wants to overhype their party as the most powerful party today. And it seems as if the Kenya Kwanza party has to either be swallowed by the ODM, or it has also to demonstrate its worthiness in being one of the most powerful party. It's all about political parties. Once you have the powerful one, it's easy to win election. So it's the same perspective here. And what we need to see is that the point that the teacher wants us to see from this story is this event here. That the moment you have a party, the moment you win peace, it's easier to win the nation. So it's all about a progressive takeover of events. So the problem is that we will want to see this align with this, but the story seems to show what? That the event of Trump taking over the nation, let me put it here, does not align with this of Hitler, because this one seems should be here, but it is not, because Hitler takes both of them at the same time. In our history, it's progression. You need to first win the party. That's why you have July 18, 2024. After you win the party, then you have what took place on November 5th, 2024. This is the popular vote, the people's choice. After that, it's not still enough. You go to the electoral college. This is December 19, 2024. And that's not enough. The handover. Which is now January 21st, 2025. So you can see the process, how it looks like. And this is not the process that we see in the history of Hitler. But the point that we want to see is when you have to rise as a dictator, the first step is looking at the takeover of the political party. And this has been the thread of storyline that we have always had. So we also tried to look at the history of Julius Caesar. And we came to the history of Caesar, and I tried to demonstrate. This is Daniel 11 from verse 5 to 16. So this has been a present truth since 2016, that prophecies of the book of Daniel will be repeated at the end of the world. And so Daniel 11 from verse 1, I think to 39, repeats in the history of 40 to 45. So, and a good explanation has been demonstrated how verse 1 to 4 is repeated, the study of the last president. 5 to 16 also has been repeated. And it is through this study we get the understanding of these two waymarks, Raphia, which is 2019, and Paniam, 2021. And so I think this is verse 11 and 12 of this story. This is verse 13 and 14. And so we are going to see that these two address the war between the king of the north and the king of the south. And when you go to verse 16 of the story, this is the way Mark would call or we parallel with the Sunday law. There is a story there. I hope someone can read for us verse 16. Okay. January? It's 20th. Okay. It's 20th. Or what was your concern? It's the correction. Thank you. Someone can read for me.
It says,
Yes.
but he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stop before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed.
So there is a power here. We will call it the king of the north. This is Rome. And what Rome is doing is going against who? The glorious. So this is a story about Rome conquering the glorious land. And when you come to this story, Rome against the glorious land, you can see it's a story that can easily be paralleled with the story about what? Daniel 11 verse what? 41. The king of the north against the what? The glorious land. Interestingly, when you zoom into this history, this is the history of Pompey. And Pompey is on an expenditure in Asia and the territories of Greece. And he happens to pass by, and in Judea, the glorious land. So this is Pompey in a confrontation with who? Judea. In Judea, there is a what? A civil war. So there is Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. So their father is dead. And what are they fighting for? Power. Hyrcanus believes, I am the elder brother, and so if I'm the eldest, I should take over from my father. And when you take over power, you have two titles, a priest and a what? A king. Aristobulus, who has been more into military expenditures with the army, believes you have been with your father, with our father in the temple, become the priest, and then you become the what? The king. So it's about power, whether religion and civility should unite or not. And in this war, Pompey does not will to conquer the glorious land, but they force him to. Just to cut the story short, they ask him to come and become a mediator into the conflict. And then they try to blackmail him. And he ends up conquering the glorious land. So we take this story and try to overlay Daniel 11:41 to demonstrate that we expect the manner in which that history fulfills to be repeated at the Sunday law history. But then, what this has been done, it's all the perspective that Elder Tess gave us. What you see is not all there is. So it's the same event, the same nation, Rome. And this is 63 BC. And now, this story, it's dealing with an external event. And what has been done, if this is this story here, another perspective of the same kingdom, same year, has been brought about, that as Pompey is on an expenditure and in a conflict with Judea, the same time, internally, what has happened? Pompey is also into a conflict with who? With Caesar. So it's the same story. But now we need to zoom in and realize this is external. Now let's look what is happening in Rome, 63 BC. And we realize there is another story here. And so Caesar wants to become a dictator. And you look at the conflict he has with Pompey. Pompey relies upon some individuals in Rome, in the Senate, who ideologically align with him. And what they are fighting for, it's power. It's Pontifex what? Is that the spelling? This is a religious title. Is it both religious and political? I don't know. But this is what they are fighting for, power. And so, by going deeper and realizing how Caesar usurps power and becomes the first Pontifex Maximus, will help us understand how Donald Trump usurps power. So all these concepts that we have here, if we understand how the past histories have been and realize that these are not new concepts, it's all going back, and what was cherry picked in the first study and left, I mean, when we cherry picked the first study of Rome, this one, we left something else that had not matured, and we are going back to the same field and picking a new concept from the same study, and it's teaching us this events that we want to understand from where we are in history. So this is not a new concept. It's not a new history. It's something that we are still have had for long, but none of us thought that by looking at the internal affairs of Rome would teach us a present truth from where we are in history. So I don't know whether anyone wants to say something up to that point, comment or question. Yes.
Daniel 11:41, the conquering of a nation or a part.
So when you come to the words of Daniel 11, he shall conquer the glorious land. So at the simplistic perspective for me, the glorious land seems to be a what? A nation, right? But how that looks, or the breakdown of how that conquering looks like, it ends up driving me to first taking over the party and the rest. The big question for me, I would ask myself, how do you conquer a nation today? When you go to the spirit of these stories in Daniel 11, how do you conquer a nation? Let me try to demonstrate. When you go to the history of the 7 kingdoms that Daniel will see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is the 7 kingdoms. I just want to borrow a concept here. And when you look at how Daniel and John puts it, the winds strive upon the wings of heaven. The struggle here is more of war. Let me just say, for the first to the third, the power struggle is through. Cyrus has to wage war to Babylon. The Greeks have to wage war to Medo-Persia. But when you come to the fourth, I will say to the sixth, to me I see a difference. It's not war. Because this is a religious one. Let me just call this military war. I don't know what to call it, hot war. But I hope you understand the concept. But this is about a religious one. Religion only. When you look at the fourth to the fifth, it's all about change of religion. They don't fight. This is pagan, and it becomes what? Purple. When you come to the history of the sixth, it's a change from purple to Christianity. Actually, inspiration says the beast rose peacefully, right? There was no power struggle. And so I think the most important question we need to ask ourselves is how this kingdom rises to power. And because this is the same kingdom that conquers the glorious land. And once we understand how the seventh kingdom rises to power, how a nation rises to power today, that it is not through the concept of making war as we have in the first, second, and third, or what Daniel puts into our minds, then we will try to understand how the conquering of the glorious land looked like. Don't know whether. Yes? Okay, I think it's still Christianity. I only wanted to make a difference that this is the mother, this is the daughter, but I would. That's why I said all of them. It's religion. You can all say it's all about religion. The way they rise, so those who come from the field, they exile to the sixth, and they're all bound by. Ellen White calls them Christian exiles. So that's the concept I picked Christianity, but I would say it's all. It's religion. It's religion, and you call it Christianity, but a counterfeited one. Yes.
Oh, would you for the seventh question?
Yes, I said we need now to see how does the seventh kingdom rise, because when you come to the sixth, and we are saying the sixth is going to rise peacefully. Actually, when you read what Ellen White says, it rises in a democratic way. They are going to have a government on what? Based on what? Representatives, and these representatives will be what? Elected through a vote, and they will represent the interests of the people. That's, I'm coming to you. And when you see how it rises, actually, it's the same way it dies. Because it's rise and death, it's in a democratic way. Because the story we are dealing with here is how the gatekeepers of democracy, they do what? They compromise. So when you look at this, the seventh kingdom now helps you understand that its rise is in a democratic way. Because people compromised here and they gave way to the rise of this kingdom here. So the dynamics of how conquering looks like here, to me, I think it's a different perspective from what the models of Daniel 11:41 gives us. Because what they try to give into our mindset is the aspect of a nation overcoming another nation. But to me, that is symbolic. Yes, Rispa.
So I'm struggling why you quickly swap between at this need to war, because even religion, you can see it. Babylon had its own religion, and even the fifth, the sixth, there is a governance structure, and there is no concept of religion. So I don't think that you're saying that war and then quickly moving to religion is really a good representation of what is happening, because we understand nations have their own governance structures across all the seven, and they also have religion in all the seven, but different religions as you move along.
So let me halfway agree with you what you are saying. But the point I wanted to demonstrate why I put war, how did manufacture overcome war? Was it a religious war or a military conquest?
It was hot war.
That was I was demonstrating. How did Greece overcome Medo-Persia? Hot. The Greeks and Alexander the Great and all the generals came and overcame the he-goat. The ram smashes the he-goat, right? But when you come to Rome, and I would also say Rome overcomes Greece the same way. But when you come to Rome, the fifth one transitioning from the fourth, I don't think pagan Rome fought Papa Rome. They just adjusted religion. They baptized what the pioneers say. We didn't see this kingdom fight hot war like these ones do. It was just a shift of religion. And the little horn rises and swallows these other horns. The same way for the sixth. It does not conquer through a hot war the Papa Rome. It rises and the spirit of what was in the field found itself in the sixth. So that's the demonstration I was making. I'm not saying that there is no religion in all, but the point I want us to see, and I wanted to demonstrate it to Mwangi, that how a kingdom rises or a kingdom conquers another, we should challenge our own perspective. Because I was not giving a direct answer, but I was trying to say that we can get answers how the seventh kingdom rises. It's not like these ones. It's not the seventh the seventh kingdom having a military war with the sixth. It's a change of perspective, ideological war. It's not hot like these ones, but most of us tend to have the spirit of looking at this way when it comes to kingdom overcoming another kingdom. But I agree there is a religion everywhere. But when you come to the seventh kingdom, it's rise and fall, like from the sixth. You need to see there is a shift. How things look at the end is not the way they look at the beginning. And so, if we want to understand how the king of the north conquers the glorious land, that aspect of conquering is what we need to ask ourselves. How does it look if a conquering of a nation in old times is different from a conquering of a nation today?
I just add to that because you could argue there's war in the pagan papal because of the three powers being built. I think significance about that is this is internal now. This is Rome v Rome. This is Roman armies in the east fighting Roman armies in the west. So I think that is a shift in dynamic there. That it's an internal thing now. It's not the same as Babylon being taken over by Medo-Persia. So I think that's probably the focus of that. You can see that. How would you argue the three powers plucked up because that's physical war?
Sure.
So from the fourth to the fifth, we have the planting of the three horns.
Yes.
So since that war, the second question is the sixth kingdom, so the beginning age, when the Catholic Rome is coming to its end. When we see war, the third question is the issue of information warfare. I thought the first six kingdoms will see some kind of war. And then when you come to 1989, the issue of war, we have the info war. What about it?
So let me first respond. I think the first question is what we just addressed here. We say we will not negate the fact that we see the three horns being plucked, but we more want to say that the war change, the dynamics change. This becomes a civil war, an internal war. It's Rome versus Rome. And the second one was this one, 1798. Don't we see war? But I don't think it's America waging war to the papacy. It's, I don't know how to call it, an internal war again, because this is France, was at the beginning the army of the king of the north, papacy. And here it's France now, and a different crown fighting the papacy. But for the sixth kingdom, I don't know what to call it. It's the same perspective I see when you come to the end of the seven.
My point was the first six we see war, whether it's internal or external. And
I agree the term war. All I want us to see that the dynamics of that war keeps changing. That was the only thought I wanted us to see. I'm not saying there is no war. All I'm saying is it's war, but the dynamics keep changing. So I'm saying by the time we come to the end, we don't expect to see the same dynamics as it was in the beginning. So when we speak of a conquering of, it's the same concept here about a dictator. So if you ask me how a dictator looks like in World War II, it's different dynamics from how a dictator looks like today, right? How a dictator rose in that time would give us bits of properties to help us understand how a dictator would rise today, but those are two different histories. So I want us to see that progressively, what looks normal and clear in the old times, these past histories, and how it looks today is different. And that's the concept I wanted to demonstrate, that a conquering of a kingdom, when you look at the word conquer, it's like so simple to show that it's a war, a nation warring against another nation. But how that looks like today, to me, it's not so simple to show that this is how war looks like, being influenced by how things look like here.
To that, maybe we could say the first four is geography, because they want to take over territory,
Yeah.
and then it shifts to ideology. Would that be another way of saying?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Actually, when you come into this, it's more an
It's
ideology.
not geography.
It's not
Yeah.
geography.
It's not them, like you
So
said.
exactly. So when you come to the conquering of the glorious land, it's all about an ideological war. And we need to have other models to demonstrate to us how that conquering looks like. Yes. Just speak.
So if change is happening on these models, how do you determine when that change so that you know that it's going to change again at the 7 and not continue whatever it is that is from 4, 6. Why? What's that thing that you use? You use as a model to determine changes here.
Okay. So when you look at the history of this is Revelation 17. And one thing you need to understand is that Revelation 17 is the same as Revelation what? 13, and it's the same as Revelation what? 12. And this is all about the study of the power struggle, rise and fall of kingdoms. And to me, how I understand is that when you want to deal with this subject, rise and fall of kingdoms, one of the concepts that you need to have at the back of our mind is how this subject has been set by John. And one thing you need to understand is the concept of the panoramic view and the what? And the dispensational view. So in one essence, John is given the panoramic view, the complete vision, 1 to 7, right? And then in another story, same chapters, John will be given a dispensational concept. Are we together? So what you need to understand is how you understand John when he's speaking about the panoramic one and the dispensational one. And a good example is that when you go to Revelation 17, John will give us the history of the 5th head, which is a dispensation. And now, if you understand how methodology works, to me, the history of the 5th kingdom will give us a glimpse of how all others look like. So when you come to the 5th kingdom, you need to understand, good example, in the 5th kingdom, there is a woman, right? The woman is riding on a what? A beast, right? So if there is a woman and a beast on the 5th, when you compare and contrast with the other beasts, what do you realize? That beast 1, the head number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 6, and number 7, let me put it this way. Number 6 and number 7, they all have the same properties. You see a woman of a beast, a woman of a beast. So the woman is on each head, the beast is on each, apart from the 6th one. That's when the beast is dead. So when you start looking at the dispensational concept, then you need to understand on which history the 5th rises, the 6th and the 5th falls continuously. But there is one important point you need to realize, that as much as the properties demonstrated in the history of the 5th are the same for 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, this is just symbolic. The woman, take an example, the woman over the beast in the 4th or the woman over the beast in the 7th are different from the woman and the beast in 5th. This woman, maybe you'd call it Catholicism, an example. I don't expect you to see Catholicism in the 7th, but it's a woman entity. So you need to realize that how this history of the 5th looks like is different from this. And it is the same. How this history looks like, it's different from this. So this is progression, nation overcoming another. So you need to trace through history when the 5th kingdom rises, when the 5th falls, when the 6th rises, when the 6th falls, and then you realize the moment you get into a dispensation, you need to isolate that dispensation and look at it independently without being influenced by other dispensations, because the human entity on the 5th is different from the 4th, the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd. Symbolically, they are the same, but how that looks like in the present world of the 5th or the 7th or the 6th is different. And that's why I was saying how a conquering looks like here in the 5th is different from how conquering looks in the history of the 7th. How a kingdom rises in the 5th, a beast, is different from how a beast rises in the 7th. Yes.
Also, if you take the model of life, death, and resurrection, understand? When you die and when you resurrect, you don't exactly the same body. You come with different bodies. If I can also give you an idea that one kingdom does not look like the next.
I think my question is not
Yes.
somewhere
Yes,
there.
yes.
In the afternoon. Yeah. But I don't think that's the question.
You can just re-ask it.
So we said like you group the people four, then you have another group of three. Then you say then you have another last group, which will be different from the first two groups. So what criteria are you using to determine that you are going to shift the way you are looking at this group at specific times? So I'm not saying like, yeah, I expect there might be a change, but when do you know when to expect a change? Because you grouped 4, 5, and 6.
I think if I got your question, I think it's based on observation. How the first conquers the second, just like that. Like I'm looking at how Babylon overcame Medo-Persia, how Medo-Persia overcame Babylon. I mean, how Medo-Persia overcame Babylon, how pagan Rome overcame peace. So you are here and you have all this history fulfilled. So I'm standing here and I'm watching how power struggle looks like here. Seems to be slightly different, as Lemas put it. This one, they are more interested on the geographical land. You can see it for yourself. These ones, it's not more about geographical land. Like in the history of the 6 and the 7, it's geographically one land, but two different ideologies. So it's an observation I'm making, and I'm saying, when I look at the characteristics of this succession of kingdoms, I'm seeing patterns. It's all observation.
Just to add to that, I don't know, Daniel 2 gives you the foundation so that you know there's a change from 4 to 3. I guess 4 to 5, sorry, because of the play being introduced. So you've got that, and that's all that's left till the end. So there's some connection there between the first 4 are metals, and then the 5th, 6th, 7th, we'd say all in the feet, and there's clay there. So there's some difference. So I guess that gives you the first, highlights the first change. And then when you get to Revelation, the 4-3 split is clear from the churches, the trumpets, that God does that. There's something about the first 4 being connected and the last 3 being connected. So you've got that overall structure from the prophecies themselves. I don't know about the last bit you said, where you said he did 4, then he did 3, and then he said something else. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
say 4, 3, and last. Like this, the boardwalk.
Oh, the 3, okay.
Yeah, so I'm
okay.
saying my categorization is based on the observation
I
here.
think I put the bracket after 4,
Yeah.
between 4 and 5.
5, 6, 7.
The league, it says
Probably do
war,
5, 6, 7.
then religion, then says that in the future something else. I mean, how do you know when it's future? As opposed to like if you're standing at 6, okay, you can make an observation in hindsight and say we've seen this and therefore we can do this and this. How do you know that this religion is not going to continue into the future?
Okay, I get your point.
Yeah, that's
So you know your point is more on this.
yeah.
Good. Okay, I saw Kodo and then you and then I continue.
No, good.
You're good, okay.
So let me say, when you look at the structure that Daniel gives us, the
Yes.
difference between the past 4 and when we come to the 5th. But I'm going to argue there's also a difference in the first 4 kingdoms because it's different methods. Why different methods? So you can see clearly there's a change there. And then my question is, what do you mean by religion? That's what I want to understand. Okay, see there's a difference from what to religion. What do you mean by religion?
So, okay. Okay, let me take it. I think, yes.
Sorry, don't we think the bracket should be after 4?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it should be 4 and 5.
So I think the reason why I put 4 here, I wanted to show the dynamics of 4 and 5.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with shifting, but I put it there to show that when you look at these 3, there is some interaction between 4, 5, 5, 6, that concept.
Yeah.
Let me just take away
Use it.
brackets.
Yeah, take the brackets.
That's what is bringing problems. I hope the point is you can understand the concept,
Yeah.
that how things look from kingdom overcoming another, it's different progressively. So, and then touching on Nyamoya's question, and I think this is where part of my subject was speaking more about the 7th, because I really wanted us to understand more about the 7th kingdom. And what we need to understand, so Nyamoya is asking, how do you know that when you come to the 7th, the dynamics of the woman or the beast is different? Are we together? So the first important thing I would want us to see before we define how it looks like, I would really want us to see that if we are seeing this in the dispensational way, each kingdom is a dispensation, then you need to realize it's another way of saying line upon line, a story upon a story. So one is a natural story, the other one is a what? A spiritual story. So the first thing I hope we can agree is that when you move from dispensation to dispensation, you can't go literal to literal, right? So we will need to have a methodical way of trying to understand how this history, maybe of the seven, I would call this the history of the field, how the history of the seven looks like. It's our spiritual lesson here. But the line of thought that we have is that we have properties from the history of the field that we will see in the history of the seven. We would agree on that. So what we now need to have is a way to understand how the history of the seven look like. I hope that is okay. So coming back, I should grab my board. I don't have space. Can you read up? I hope my time will allow me to finish. 10, attending minutes. So what I wanted us to see first is that we need to understand that Revelation 17 is 12 is 13. And there are many things that you'll be able to see. When you go to Revelation 12, what do you see? Yes? There is a war, right? The war is between who and who? So it's a dragon with 7 heads and what? 10 horns in war with who? Which woman? You'd call her the pure woman, right? Then, so let's put it here. So this is 12. So you see, there is a dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and it's war with a, let me call the pure woman. Then you go to 13. In 13, what do you see? There is a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, right? Is the beast in war? Some are saying yes. Is the beast in war? Who says yes here? Two. The beast is in war with who? The saints. Good. Then let's go to 17. What do we have? There is a woman now. Let me just say, horse. Riding a beast, and the beast has 7 heads, 10 horns. I think in 12, it's the 10 that have crowns. I think in 17, no, it's the heads, if I'm not wrong. Then this one, it's the horns that have crowns. And a 17 is the whole in a conflict again with someone. Who? Saints. So what you need to see is that if this is the same story, there are some of you need to compare and contrast and realize that this pure woman is the saints. Can you really see that? Then when you go to 17, there is a whore who rides on a beast. You're not told that in 13, you're not told that in 12. So what do you need to realize? That over the beast, there must be a whore. Over the dragon, there must be a whore. Remember, if you go to the basic history, this dragon is the 4th kingdom here. This one. And so, if we say that the woman entity is everywhere, you need to realize that the dragon is being ridden by a whore. And the war is against a pure woman or the saints or the saints. So you start feeling gaps that are missing. I hope you can see that. So, and then, after you have all that outline, you need to go to Revelation 17 and have a robust understanding of that chapter. So when you go to 17 from verse 1, I'm just going to make an introduction. Then, when we have time next year, we will continue. So when you go to 17, from verse 1, so There came one of the 7 angels with the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. So this is how I understand. I'm just going to give an overview, and then we can maybe next time we have a class, I will try to demonstrate this in details. So when you go from verse 1 for me until verse 7, so the one, the issue they are addressing here, the conversation between this angel and John, is that he's giving him a better description of the picture that John sees. He tells him, come here. So you need to know where John is taken. Come here. And I'm now going to show you what. So you need to ask yourself from verse 1, where is John taken? And when John is taken, John sees something. He's told, I will show unto you the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. But when you begin to read, the first thing John is told in verse 2, it's a continuation actually, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth made drunk with the wine of our fornication. And then verse 3, John tells us where he's taken. He's carried in the wilderness. So you need to understand where is that wilderness. And when John is taken in the wilderness, John is going to see something. This whore, a woman riding on a scarlet-colored beast. And from there, John is given more clarity on how the woman looks like. She's arrayed in purple and scarlet. On her forehead, it's a name written. And verse 6 tells us that the woman is actually drunk with the blood of the saints and blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when John saw her, John is going to wonder with admiration. And the angel will ask John, why are you marveling? I will now explain to you the mystery of the woman, of the beast that carried her, with 7 heads and 10 horns. And from verse 8, more explanation is given. But what I want us to see is this interaction between the whore, the kings of the earth, and the what? And the inhabitants. So we need first to understand the interaction. Because when you go from verse 1 to 3, what is told is that the woman, what the kings have done, what have the kings done? They have committed what? Fornication. Let me just say they have fornicated. And then, what about the inhabitants of the earth? They are what? They are drunk. So we need to understand this interaction here. Because I'm suggesting that when you do a study, we will do that in our next time, we will first understand who is this whore. So as I have said, this is a symbol. We will take that symbol, understand it, who is a whore, this woman. Then this whore is going to sit. What is to sit? That's another symbol we need to ask ourselves. And the woman sits upon a beast, and we will be able to show the connection between the beast and the kings of the earth, and then ask ourselves, what is this fornication here? And then we ask ourselves, these inhabitants have been drunk with her own wine. So just to give a glimpse of what this story is all about. This woman here, the main target is these inhabitants of the earth. But you cannot directly influence the what? The inhabitants. Because to get to the inhabitants, you have first to go through the what? The kings. Because the kings rule over the people. So you need to sit. I'm going to replace sit with control. You need to control kings to reach to the people. So the woman has, I hope we still agree, wine can be a doctrine or an idea, whatever you want to call it for now, that this whore here has the main target as the inhabitants. But to get the inhabitants, you must go through what? Kings. And I think that's the demonstration, the dynamics that is being demonstrated by the first few verses here. That I'm going to show you the judgment of the whore. But before we are shown of the judgment, we are given an explanation of what leads to her judgment. So the whore, kings have fornicated with the whore, and the inhabitants have been drunk. So the questions we ask, how did the inhabitants get drunk? And we will see that the manner in which they are drunk, it is through the authorization given by these kings who rule over the inhabitants. I think my time is up. So I'm just going to do a short recap, and then next time we'll pick from here. So I was just refreshing our mindset on a series of classes I've been doing. We want to understand, we stand here in history, and we want to understand better about this event, this waymark here, which begins our new dispensation of the latter rain. We have had 5 teachers try to explain this event, and seems we are now more oriented to the waymark July 18, 2024, because there are proofs that seems to give weight on this waymark here. So some of them, we have looked at them, we have refreshed our mindset, QFMG, and as the symbol QFMG, it gives us the waymark July, and the month of July, the event, an election, which is connected to the symbol of the Sunday law. So, and when you look at this subject here, it is what perfectly demonstrates July, because what comes into our mind is that we need to go to the month of July and see an event connected to an election which marks the Sunday law. And the RNC, the issue of the Republican Party, which takes place in 18, becomes the fulfillment of this study here. So you need other testimonies to demonstrate that. So a second one is given, that the story is all about the rise of a dictator. And to rise as a dictator, we need to see it in the party, in the government, and then you go to the world. This story is an internal story showing us how Trump rose as a dictator. It's a progressive story from 2014 to 2024. And it's all about the purging of the party, reorganizing the party, and making it a suitable vehicle to usurp power. Because when you have a strong party, you can easily win elections and win a nation. And then we see the next study, which is the third testimony, the rise of Hitler, a subject we have interacted with in different shapes in this movement. These two stories, the subject under Julius Caesar and the subject under Hitler, are all teaching us about how the gatekeepers compromise to allow a dictator to rise to power. So we look at the history of Caesar, and so it's not an unfamiliar story to us. It's all about going to the same field and looking at a different perspective of the same story. As we will do with the Diadochi Wars, the history of Greece, Daniel cherry picks concepts from one story of the same field. We would come back and cherry pick what was left. And from there, we realize that from the study of Caesar, showing us how he rose to power, how, I'm forgetting that name, the Senate, they were the Optimas or something beginning with an O. They were the conservative party in Rome, and they challenged the rise of Caesar, but they ended up compromising and allowing him to become the Pontifex Maximus, the first dictator in Rome. And so we are going to see that these two histories, this one and this one, have the same understanding how a dictator rose to power by the gatekeepers, the party that should protect democracy, compromising. Then I think we had a question here where we wanted to understand, how does conquering of the glorious land look like? And the point I wanted to demonstrate here is that the perspective given by this subject is a nation conquering another nation. The aspect of conquering is to win or to take over. So how you take over another nation And I demonstrated this nation, by taking over this other nation, it's waging a war, a hot war. The Persians under Cyrus plan a military expenditure which takes days. Actually, it was not days. When you go to the historians, it was not a one-day war. It was a series of wars. And I think when you go to the book of Ezekiel, I think 21, when what Ezekiel says, the people are complaining, murmuring. They say that every vision failed, and what that vision is that the people would see Cyrus' armies at the walls of Babylon, and they thought that this is the time when we are going to be set free. But the moment Cyrus comes, he's unable to climb over the walls or to break the Babylonian gates, and he ends up retreating. And the people hearts grew weary and they were frustrated and disappointed, claiming the visions keep failing. But God is going to tell Ezekiel to tell the people, we are not going to live at the effect of every vision. Cyrus could not have overthrown Babylon before the appointed time when the 70 years came to fulfillment. So, series of war after war, hot wars. And then I wanted us to see, but when you start approaching the fourth to the fifth, there is a dynamical change. It's an ideological, or what Rogers was asking when I say religion. This is a pagan religion. This is a purple religion. In one perspective, they are the same. They are all pagan. But you need to realize that this is paganism baptized. How the fifth overcomes the fourth is not like this hot war here. Geographically, this wants to take over each other's kingdom. When you look at this fourth and fifth, it's actually one nation. They are both wrong. But there is the spirit of the fifth and the spirit of the fourth. You need to see there is a change. So definitely, the woman riding on the fourth, that ideology is different from the ideology of the fifth. The same for the sixth. How the sixth overcomes and becomes the sixth kingdom, it's a rise that is peaceful, a democratic one actually, and it's different from how these wars look like here. And I was saying, we need to see the same dynamic. The rise of the seventh kingdom is different, and that difference will be marked by us having a way to come and see how the seventh kingdom rose to power. The only bit I give is that if the sixth kingdom falls democratically, the story here, then it means the seventh comes in a democratic way. This subject here tells us that Hitler tries to assert power through a coup, and he fails. He goes now through an election, a democratic exercise, and wins power. That's the lesson we learned from Donald Trump. The imagery of the seventh kingdom, how Trump took power, it's through a democratic way. So we begin to see dynamics of how the seventh kingdom looks like. Then I was trying to give a concept that if you want to understand these kingdoms, you need to understand this concept of the panoramic view and the dispensational view to realize that the characteristics that are in the fifth are the same characteristics in all other kingdoms. God is going to give us a dispensation to give us a glimpse of how these other kingdoms look like. But we must be careful, this line upon line, you can't go from literal to literal and say, this was a religion, the fifth, the woman, so this must be a religion. You can't do that. You need to isolate every dispensation and understand it independently. And then I gave an introductory thought to what I was to do. I didn't expect us to spend more time on past concepts, that if we want to understand the history of the seven, we must understand the power struggle as explained by Revelation 17, 13, and 12. Actually, we were having a conversation with Leonard about Revelation 12. I think Rispa was there. I wish he was here. Kuja hapa. For once, I contribute as a question. So we were giving a concept. I know time is up. We may not have the chance for the afternoon. But what we were trying to demonstrate is when you look at Revelation 12, so the first thing you need to identify is that this story is Genesis 3. So God puts enmity between who and who. The serpent that is the dragon, and the what? And the pure woman. So it's a controversy between the pure woman and the serpent. The same story that is here. And then that enmity is what we see demonstrated. There is a curse upon the woman. You shall have traveling bad, and the dragon or the serpent will try to devour the seed of the woman, right? That's what happens in 12. The woman is in travel, wants to give birth, the serpent wants to devour. And then you are seeing, if this is the first controversy here on earth that we see in Genesis, we can take the story back to heaven and you can tell us what you are saying.
Amen.
Yes.
He's running away. You're not happy. But okay, anyway, we'll end there. But the story can be taken back to heaven and you can see the same entities in heaven. So the war that we are seeing here at the end, you can take it back to heaven and you can see the same entities as it is in Revelation 17. So
just to say, the opposition party is ultimate.
optimates, that's the
And
one.
I think it's also interesting, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one I was looking for, optimates. So this Senate that is fighting against Caesar, they are called the optimates. So we will enter. So this was.
Dear Lord, we want to thank you so much for the truth that you have revealed in this time. We want to pray that we lay ground and we will give answers for this concession. That we will also be prepared for the close of the nation. So, how we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.